All right, so let's start at the beginning. Hey, imagine you wanted to track 100 numbers. Let's say they're test scores. You could write a program like what I'm showing you here. You could say int score 1 equals, scan next int, score 2 equals, and you could have 100 variables, score 1, score 2, score 3. That would be pretty annoying though. And the good news is these things called arrays give us a powerful tool that helps us deal with this sort of situation. So, and I define arrays here at the bottom of the screen. An array is a fixed size, sequential collection of elements of the same type. So if we were talking about these test scores, what it means is we could have one variable that holds 100 test scores. So, and then I'll show you how we would access that. This is how you create an array. So you can create an array of any variable type. So it can be integers, doubles, booleans, even custom classes like the frog type that we were using last semester. And we were writing all different kinds of cool custom classes. You can make an array of anything. For this one, I'm just doing an integer array. So int array, that's square brackets after the word int tells Java you're making an array, and then you do the name of it, and then you say new, and then again, you say what type it is, but then put in the square brackets how big you want it to be. So when you create an array, that's when you say how big you want it to be, and you can't resize it later. So you make it a certain size. So the square brackets tell Java you're making an array, and then over on the far right, it tells Java how big the array is. Okay. So then we access individual elements of an array using square brackets and an index value. So the index values go from 0 to 1 less than the length of the array. So here I'm showing you, I'm setting the values. I'm writing code that sets the values, like scores 0 equals 99, square bracket 1 equals 78, and then the fourth line there, scores 99 equals 92. That's just setting the last score to be 92. So, hey, by the way, you can turn off your videos if you want. It's not bothering me that I see most of you, but if you want to turn that off, it's fine. So if you try to access an index that's out of bounds, either bigger than the size, bigger than allowed, or less than 0, you get this error that says array index out of bounds exception. So when you get one of these, the error message usually tells you what the index was that didn't work. So here's an actual message. I forced Java to have an error. It says exception in thread main java.lang.array index out of bounds exception, and then it says 100. And so for this scores array, if you were trying to access element 100, you would get this error because there are 100 elements altogether, but they go from index 0 to index 99. It's kind of like a string and the index values of the different characters in a string. So at least there's that consistency. So all right, we're going to talk about some properties of arrays. Arrays have a size value, which is we access through the property length. So we can find out how many elements are in an array using dot length. And notice it's not dot length with the parentheses after it. It's a property of the array. We're not calling a method. When you call str.length with the parentheses on the end, you're calling the length method of a string. But here, for arrays, they don't have a length method. They have a length property. Anyway, you'll get used to it. To print an array, I kind of wish it was different, but I didn't create Java, so there you go. You'd think you could just print it, but down here on this screen share, I show you if you just print an array, you get that funky output. Just like if you printed a frog object or any custom class, you get that weird output. That's great. It's great that it doesn't crash, but it doesn't help us. So to print an array, if you want to see the contents of an array, you print it usually with a for loop. So I'll show you right here. Here's a very simple for loop. For int I equals 0, I less than scores.length, I plus plus. And then we're printing in here the score sub I, and then a space, just so the scores would print out in a line, all on one line. Anyway, this is a great way to print an array. You could use a while loop if you wanted, it doesn't matter, but this is using a for loop. Any questions so far? Hey, and here's something. By default, integer and double and Boolean arrays all have default values. So integer arrays, they have a default value. When you create one, every element in the array has the default value of 0. And when you create a double array, every value is 0 or 0.0. And when you create a Boolean array, every value is false. So these are just some examples. So I'm creating an int array called nums, and when I print item 0, I'd get a 0. And I create a double array called vals with 100 values in it. When I print element 47, I get a 0.0. And then I'm making a 17 element Boolean array. When I print item 4, it prints false. It's just good to know they have default values. And check this out. We can create and fill arrays all in one step using what's called an array initializer. And that'll be appropriate data separated by commas, put between curly brackets or braces. So here's an example where I'm creating an integer array called nums with 5 elements in it. And then I kind of wish I'd shown you this sort of table before, but this is one way to imagine what's in an array. When we create this array called nums with the array initializer, it puts 4, 3, 21, 7, and 8 into the spots, like in order. And then the number up above the cells I'm showing you is what index, what element we're talking about. So after if I ran this code, if I ran the code down below and just said print nums.length, we'd get 5 because there's 5 elements in that array. And then if I said, hey, print nums square bracket 4, it would print the item here in the element 4, which is really the 5th element, but there you go. Questions? It's called an array initializer. I think I give another example here. Yeah, here's array initializers for a double array and a Boolean array. So here I'm making a double array called vals, and then I just have 3 double values between the curly brackets. That creates an array with 3 elements in it. And same with this Boolean one. I made it with false, true, true, false. And then I run this code down below that changes one of the values and then prints them all. So hopefully you can follow what I have up here. First, I create the array with 4 elements, false, true, true, false. Right here, I'm saying, hey, status 0, element 0, this first one, change it to true. And then I'm going ahead and printing them all with a space between them. And that's what this is, true, 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 false. Cool. So we can also make and use arrays for reference variable types like strings and our custom classes. So first I'm going to show you a string example. So you can say string array. So say the word string and then the square brackets that are empty, and then pets, that's the name of the string array. And then we're using an array initializer, and I just have 3 strings. So it creates an array of strings. And then I'm showing you code here that's accessing each element in the array and changing it using a for loop. So here I'm saying, hey, we got integer I is going to go from 0 to 1 less than the length. And then right here I'm saying pets sub I equals pets sub I to uppercase. So this is actually replacing each animal with the uppercase version of the animal. So we're often going to do for loops to go through arrays. Whether, imagine if you had an array full of test scores, you might want to know the average test score. So you'd want to add them all together and then divide by how many there were. That's a really common thing to do with arrays. Or maybe you're going to go through an array and find out if a particular value is present in the array. Like, is there a chicken in Mr. Hayes's array? So you'd go through all the elements and just check, hey, is this chicken? Yeah, hey, we got a chicken. I'm thinking of one thing that I forgot to tell you, but I'm going to see if it comes up, and then I'll go back if I have to. Yeah, here we go. So I told you can make an array of any variable type. So remember, in December we were writing custom classes, and I know I wrote the frog class, but it's an example of a custom class, and you can make a frog array. So remember we did like student, we did bicycle, we did coffee drink, we have all these different custom classes that we wrote in November and December. You can make an array of any of those things. So here's what's interesting. I'm saying, hey, frog array called pond equals new frog. So what that does is it creates an empty 5-element array of frog objects. And here's the deal. When you create an array of that's not a primitive array, primitive being int, double, or Boolean. Remember, those are called primitive variable types. All other variable types are called reference or object variable types. And when you create an array of reference variable types, each element initially has the value of null. Null means there's nothing here, but that's what actually happens. So if I run this code, frog array called pond equals a new frog array with 5 elements. If I go ahead and print pond, the element at index 3, it literally prints the word null, because we haven't put any frogs in there yet. In a way, it's like we created. Here's a great visualization of it. When I create the frog array, we have this array where they're all null, and null is not a frog. You can't like say pond square bracket 3 dot hop because there isn't a frog there yet. But and then here's a call that actually puts a frog at index value 3. So I say pond square bracket 3 equals new frog. That puts a frog into spot number 3, and the name of that frog is actually pond square bracket 3. You know how sometimes we did, here's a frog called Hank, or a frog called A. We'd say frog A equals new frog. Go ahead.
If I name my frog null, what will happen with Java?
I don't think you're allowed to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We should try it later. That'd be an interesting experiment. But I think just like you can't name something the word new, it's a keyword, a reserved word in the language. So, anyway, when you make a new array of object or reference data, whether it's frogs or students or books, all the different custom classes, it creates the spaces for everything, and then each thing is empty. It has the word the value null in it, and then you have to go through and put the actual frogs in there. So we would normally do this with a for loop, but let's let's look. So remember, I created one frog at index 3. So if I wanted to hop that frog, I would say pond square bracket 3 dot hop it 12 spots. And then if I wanted to print that frog, I could say print pond 3, and it would print what was at that spot. Now, normally you would create an array of frog objects, and then you would initialize the array, we call it. You'd create a frog at each spot. So look at this for loop. So if I did this for loop, this would put a new default frog at each spot. So we do a for loop int I equals 0, I less than pond.length, and pond square bracket I equals new frog. That puts a new frog in each spot. And then we could actually, if we wanted to hop every frog, we could have a command pond square bracket I dot hop, and in a for loop again. Could be a for loop or a while loop. For loops are easier when you know exactly how many times you want to repeat. So in summary, so arrays are collections of related data. They're all, an array holds only one type of data. We have primitive arrays, that's int, double, or Boolean. We have reference or object arrays, which is every other type of variable. We refer to the collection using a single variable name. And we access individual elements using square brackets and these index values. The first index is 0, and the last is the length of the array minus 1. So if there's 5 elements in the array, the last index is 4. If you try to access an element out of that range, you get an error, an exception error. Java crashes. The nice thing about the crash message is it does tell you what's going on. Like, and then you're like, oh yeah, I tried to go too far. All right, the size of the array is determined when you create it, and you can't change it later. Arrays always have a default initialization value. Int arrays, it's 0. Doubles, it's 0. Booleans, it's false. And all reference data, the default value is null. And if you know the values for the array at the time of creation, you can use an initializer list, that array initializer list in the curly brackets. And finally, to print the contents of an array, we often use a for loop. That's why I did a warm-up today with for loops. I think this is it. Oh, here we go. Now today in class, we're going to do this thing. Array practice. I'll post it in just a second. And then if you didn't finish the warm-up, I definitely want you to finish the warm-up. So let me post today's thing. It has our slide deck, and it's also got the whole thing worked out. I worked it out back in December and recorded myself doing it. And yeah, I'll make breakout rooms. That sounds good. And anyway, I'm happy to see you all here today. And I'm going to open the rooms, and then why don't you chat me, reminding me who's supposed to be in which room. So, oh, and I'll turn off